Margaret always says this all the time after I do a reading, that how much the reading went hand in hand with what I'm going to say. And when Dennis gave his reading, I thought, I don't even think I have to get up here because he said everything that I'm talking about today. So, he did a good job. And in a further note, Stephen got you up and moving, and what I am inviting you to do today is to move and to groove with a woman known as Peace Pilgrim. This woman dedicated her life to inner peace, and she literally walked her talk. She started out in January 1st in 1953 in Pasadena, California during the Rose Bowl parade, and she dedicated her life to peace by walking for peace. So she adopted the name Peace Pilgrim, and she walked across the United States for 28 years, from California to New York to California, north, south, east, and west. The girl moved. And she did not want to be known for the person that she was prior to being Peace Pilgrim. She really just wanted to know what she did for peace. But I will tell you that she was the type of girl that Bruce Springsteen sang songs about. She was a Jersey girl. Any Jersey girls here today? So, Peace Pilgrim's only possessions were the clothes on her back. She wore a blue tunic that said Peace Pilgrim on the front, and 25,000 miles on foot for peace on the back. She had no organizational backing, carried no money, and would not even ask for food or shelter. When she began her pilgrimage, she had taken a vow to remain a wanderer until mankind learned the way of peace, walking until given shelter, and fasting until given food. Her needs were met. God presented himself to her as person after person offered her food and shelter. She said the longest she ever went without food was 4 meals, and she was often presented with more food than she could handle. She went on to talk at churches, universities, and local and national radio and television. She became a celebrity of sorts. Now, she did not have a formal background in religion, but she came to universal beliefs that I feel would classify her as a modern-day mystic. And Peace Pilgrims had this to say about God. Intellectually, I touched God many times as truth. And emotionally, I touched God as love. I touched God as goodness. I touched God as kindness. It came to me that God is a creative force, a motivating power, and all-over intelligence, an ever-present, all-pervading spirit, which binds everything in the universe together and gives life to everything. That brought God close. I could not be where God is not. You are within God, and God is within you. So you see, her beliefs went hand in hand with what we are presenting at Joyful Gathering. She was a great believer in the Golden Rule. Here are her thoughts on that regard. I felt sure I was being prepared for the pilgrimage when I read the Golden Rule. In history, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, expressed in a lot of different ways and pointing out that every culture had one. I got an inner confirmation. It affected my entire life. In fact, there were certain offshoots of the Golden Rule which carried over into the pilgrimage. When I was in high school, I had a little saying, if you want to make friends, you must be friendly. If you analyze it, that is the offshoot of the Golden Rule. It is the recognition that people react according to the influence brought to bear upon them. I have it in my life today, she went on to say. If you want to make peace, you must be peaceful. So, the reason why the talk today is called Steps to Inner Peace is threefold. Of course, one is the fact that Peace Pilgrim walked for peace. Second is the fact that Peace Pilgrim's life was one of unfoldment. She went through various phases and preparations for her journey as Peace Pilgrim. And third is the booklet, Steps to Inner Peace. And this is a booklet that contains all of Peace Pilgrim's beliefs. And I have to say here that I contacted the website Friends of Peace Pilgrim when I heard about Peace Pilgrim, and they were kind enough to send us these booklets so that each one of you can have these to reflect upon and to read upon. And if you didn't get one on the way in, there's 2 baskets in the front that you can get a booklet from. So everything that I'm talking about today is contained in the booklet. Okay, so Peace Pilgrim said to herself, I felt a complete willingness without any reservation to give my life, to dedicate my life to service. She prayed, please use me, and a great peace came over her. For her, it was a point of no return. She said, after that, you can never completely go back to a self-centered way of living. And this led to the second phase of her life. She began to live a life to give what she could instead of what she could get. She entered a wonderful new world of meaning, and she said it took her 15 years of preparation from being willing to give her life to actually giving her life. So what I'm going to present to you today is her steps to inner peace. The first thing that she had to do was to prepare herself, and in the book it explains there's 4 preparations towards inner peace. The first one is take the right attitude towards life. Stop being an escapist and start looking life squarely in the eye. And when I read that, I felt, ouch. I'm going to go any further with this. But it's really not that bad, and works hand in hand with the teachings here. She says that when problems come along, we don't just wish they'd go away. We realize that no problem ever comes to us that does not have a purpose. And looking at the bigger picture, you will recognize that problems are opportunities in disguise. If we do not face problems, we just drift along in life. And there's no inner growth without facing your problems, and with no inner growth, there can be no inner peace. Number 2 is you bring your life into harmony with the laws that govern the universe. And that simply means that only good can overturn evil, and that those who do unloving things hurt themselves spiritually. And Peace Pilgrim demonstrated this by doing the things she believed in. And she did them very simplistically. She did not confuse herself by taking on too much. Remember, she prepared for 15 years. And she basically says, if there is something that you should not be doing, just stop doing it. Now, we're not saying Nancy Reagan, just say no here, okay? We're saying just stop doing it. And if you find yourself stopping doing it, but then reaching into the cookie jar again, Mr. Bill, you just stop doing it. You do this gently. There's no judgments here. This is about peace. You find yourself something once again doing that you're trying to stop. You say, I'm a work of art in progress. Gently I will change. Number 3. This is one I think that everyone at Joyful Gathering is going to like. It's called Celebrate Your Uniqueness. Is anybody celebrating their uniqueness?
I love myself so much.
You love yourself so much. What she says is every one of us has a special place in the pattern of life. And we learn through listening. God's guidance can only be known from within. We must remain open to God's guidance. And you begin to do your part in the pattern of life by doing all the good things that you feel motivated towards, even though they're just little things at first. You make these your priority, and the superficial things that customarily clutter human life falls away. And simply put, all this means is to extend love to others. When love fills your life, all limitations are gone. The medicine the sick world needs so badly is love. And number 4 is simplify your life. Basically, everything beyond need becomes a burden. It's something only that you need to take care of. And if there is something that is too much of a burden, you need to let it go. We're not saying here that you're not supposed to enjoy nice things. All we're saying is it's nice to own nice things, but don't let nice things own you. And here's a wonderful example that she provides. She says, I remember a dear lady who was up in years, and she was working so hard, and she was always complaining. And I finally said to her, I said, why in the world do you need to work so hard when you only have you to support? And she said, oh, but I have to pay rent on a 5-room house. A 5-room house, I replied, but you're alone in the world. Couldn't you be happy in 1 room? And she said, oh, yes, but I have furniture for a 5-room house. She was actually working her fingers to the bone to provide a proper home for her furniture. So again, it's nice to own nice things, but don't let nice things own you. So there you have the 4 preparations. Number 1, take the right attitude towards life. Number 2, bring your life into harmony with the laws that govern the universe. Number 3 is celebrate your uniqueness. Everyone has a special place in the pattern of life. And number 4, simplify your life. And again, you don't need to remember anything or write anything down, for everything is contained in the booklet. And now we have the 4 purifications. Again, it took her 15 years, and these are steps, and we're climbing high. The first thing she says is purification of the body. Peace Pilgrim explains that you think purification of the body might be the first area in which people would be willing to work, but from practical experience, she discovered it's often the last. And that's what I like about Peace Pilgrim. She gave me an out. I can work on ministerial now and Weight Watchers after the first of the year. And basically she's saying we cling to old habits. But this is all about healthy eating, whole foods, junk food in equals junk food out, and you need to get plenty of rest and plenty of exercise. And if you find yourself dipping into the cookie jar again, you just say no, without judgment. Number 2 is purification of thought. This is, again, a joyful gathering concept. Thoughts are powerful. They have the capacity to create wonderful good, and they have the power to make you ill if you use them negatively. It's everything we're learning here to change your thinking, change your life. And she also touches upon forgiveness. And she says the one person we must forgive the most is ourselves. Peace Pilgrim said, you must learn to forgive yourself as easily as you forgive others, and then take a further step and use all the energy you've used in condemning yourself to improve yourself. And she said when she started doing that, her life really started to change. And she said not only that, but she was able to inspire others. Number 3, purification of desire. Now this is a tricky one, and people immediately get their feathers ruffled, and they immediately think of their dollars, and they start thinking that they shouldn't desire anything, and that they should accept their lot in life. And they say, but we're science of mind. We manifest here. And I say, yes. God wants you to be healthy. He wants you to be prosperous. He wants you to be happy. But you need to be in alignment with God's will. So a certain amount of material goods is essential, of course. And we are here to enjoy the good of life. But material wealth is the least important thing, and often the least that needs to be purified. You are here to find God. And if necessary, you need to put aside everything that gets in the way of knowing God. But we're not necessarily talking money here. That's an easy one, so don't focus on it. We're talking about habits. We're talking about prejudices and preconceived notions. These are things like the desire to be better than, the desire to be special, or to be the smartest one, to view another as unworthy because they are not the same as you. This is what really needs to be purified. Because when you put yourself as better than, you're making someone else less than. And this step also means that you draw upon your intuitive guidance that you received in the celebration of your uniqueness, and you run with it. You do God's will for you, not your Father's will for you, or not what your mother said would make you happy. It's having the trust that turning your life and your will over to the care of God will bring you happiness and prosperity. So, when we are in purification of desire, we are living God's principles. We are living in harmony. We are living in peace. we are living in joy. We are living in abundance and health, and we are treating others as we would like to be treated. Number 4, purification of motive. And Peace Pilgrim explains all of this better than I ever could. And she says the motive, if you are to find inner peace, must be an outgoing motive. Service, of course. Service. It is the giving, not the getting. Your motive must be good if your work is to have a good effect. The secret of life is being in service. Now she goes on to give an example. She says, I knew a man who was an architect. It was obviously his right work, but he was doing it for the wrong motive. His motive was to make a lot of money and to get ahead of the Joneses. And he worked himself into an illness. And it was shortly after that that she met him. And she said, I got him to do little things of service. I talked to him about the joy of service. And I knew that after he had experienced this, he could never go back to self-centered living. We corresponded a bit after that. And a few years later, I hardly recognized him. When I stopped in to see him, he was such a changed man. But he was still an architect. He was drawing a plan and he talked to me about it. And he said, you see, I'm designing this to fit into their budget. And then I'll set it on a plot of land to make it look nice. His motive was to be of service. And he drew plans for the people to make them happy. He was radiant and transformed. And his wife told me that his business had increased because people were now coming to him from miles around to design their homes. She says, I've met a few people who had to change their jobs in order to change their lives. But I've met many, many more who merely had to change their motive to service in order to change their lives. So, there you have the 4 purifications. Purification of the body, purification of thought, purification of desire, and purification of motive. These are all steps to inner peace. And there is so much more to share. And we are fortunate because we have the booklets, because we obviously do not have much more time. But I did want to say that I'm grateful to be here today to share her wisdom. And I really felt that she was a truly remarkable woman, a really courageous woman to do what she did and the life that she lived. But what also is reflected in her writings and what people said about her is that she was also a very fun woman, a very feisty woman, and the way that she taught peace to people was through songs, was through poems, was through jokes. So I'd like to leave you with a poem, and it's a very feisty poem in nature, and I think it shows you the fun side of her, or the side of her that's willing to laugh at life. And it's called Christian Church. And she says, he said, of course, I may be wrong, but I wouldn't be surprised if this were the greatest Christian church that ever man devised. Our organ is the very best. Our choir stays on key. Our stained glass windows priceless. Our pulpit the best you see. But only the wealthy are welcome here. I heard slanderous gossip galore, and from the pulpit, so highly prized, the preacher glorified war. Is there anything more you'd want in a church? In pride, he said to me. Just one thing, I made reply. Christianity. Thank you.